My name is Katherine Miller. Today should have been the highlight of my life, graduation day. I'd been counting down for months, 8 long years to earn this moment. As I put on my gown, excitement rushed through me. But as I checked my phone, familiar unease crept in. I'd sent countless reminders. In return, ghostly silence. My younger brother Ryan was throwing a backyard barbecue today. Music, food, laughter. The thought of my family choosing his party over my graduation left a pit in my stomach. Inside the auditorium, my eyes darted around, searching for my parents. How could I celebrate without them? Then I saw it, my aunt's social media. A photo of my brother in their backyard. Congrats, grad, banner behind him. He wasn't graduating from anything. My mom beside him, laughing, holding a plate of food. The timestamp matched the exact moment I was supposed to walk across the stage. They chose burgers over my doctorate, so I decided to disappear and erase everything. If you've ever been abandoned on your biggest day for someone else's ordinary moment, this is for you. If you've ever been abandoned on your biggest day, this is for you. I stared at the screen. Walking across that stage, the applause sounded distant, muffled by the roaring question in my head. If this isn't enough for her, what will ever be? After the ceremony, the crowd spilled onto the lawn. Parents wrapped arms around their kids, friends hugged, cried, posed for pictures. I stood alone at the edge of it all. I called my mom, straight to voicemail. I called again. This time, someone picked up, but all I heard was music and laughter. Hold on, everyone! I need a picture of the guest of honor. My mom's voice, distant but clear. It wasn't me. I hung up before she realized she'd answered. For a few seconds, I just stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. Was I really going to keep pretending this was normal? That I was okay with being the backup child, the flexible one, the one who always understood? On the drive back to my apartment, the anger settled into something colder. Clarity. If I stayed, I'd keep orbiting around people who barely noticed when I crossed milestones alone. If I left, at least the silence would be honest. By the time I parked, the plan had started forming. First, I opened the family group chat, scrolled through years of messages about Ryan's games, Ryan's promotions, Ryan's opportunities, with my accomplishments squeezed into the gaps like afterthoughts. I hovered over the Leave Conversation button, then closed the app. Walking away had to mean more than just a thumb pressing leave. It had to mean dismantling the version of myself they thought they owned. I pulled out my laptop, wrote a list. Close out the lease, transfer savings, apply to jobs far away, really far away. Remove them from everything. Emergency contacts. I messaged Emma Torres, the one person who'd always treated my achievements like they actually mattered. I'm serious this time. I'm done. I need a clean break. Is San Francisco still as far away as it sounds? Her reply came within a minute. Yes, and you have a couch here until you find something better. If you're really doing this, we'll make it work. I looked around my apartment. The photo frame on my desk holding the last picture of my family all together. My mom's smile in that photo suddenly looked fake, like it belonged to a stranger. That night, I packed what I could fit in my car, slid my key under my landlord's door, stared at my phone one last time. There were still no messages from my mother asking how graduation had gone. So I sent her my own message, a single photo of me in my cap and gown, standing alone in the empty auditorium after everyone had left. No caption, no explanation. Just the truth she didn't bother to witness. Then I muted her number, placed the phone face down on the passenger seat, turned the key in the ignition. Was I running away? Or finally walking out of a role I was never meant to play? The miles blurred together as I drove west, my old life shrinking in the rearview mirror. Every state line I crossed felt like another invisible cord snapping. By the time I reached San Francisco, exhaustion clung to me. But underneath it was something new. Relief. Emma met me in front of her building, arms open wide. "You actually did it! You really left!" What was I supposed to do? Wait around for her to remember I exist? Emma didn't argue, didn't try to defend my mother. She just helped me carry my boxes up the stairs. The first week was a haze of logistics. I applied for jobs during the day, spent evenings rewriting my life on paper. Emergency contact, Emma Torres. Next of kin, N.A. Permanent address, San Francisco, California. Every form that used to have my mother's name on it became a small ritual of erasure. If she wasn't going to show up when I needed her, she didn't get to be the person the hospital called. Eventually, I got an offer from a mid-sized startup. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. At night, I sat on Emma's couch, scrolling through my photos. I started deleting. First went the easy ones, blurry selfies, duplicates. Then I went after the images that hurt. My mom hugging Ryan at his birthday while I stood in the background. My mom cheering at his games. My mom smiling in the front row of his events, while my photos from award ceremonies were selfies in bathroom mirrors, because no one was there to take them. One by one, I removed them, from my phone, from my cloud, from social media. I didn't rage delete, I curated. I erased her. Not because I wanted to pretend she'd never existed, but because I refused to keep preserving a version of her that had never truly shown up for me. San Francisco slowly became a life. A keycard that actually opened doors. Meetings where people listened when I spoke. Mornings where I woke up and didn't immediately check my phone to see if my mom remembered I existed. But even as I built that life, there was a quiet awareness humming in the background. I had disappeared from her world. But the part of me that wanted her to notice the empty space where I used to stand, that part was still very much alive. The email from the lawyer came on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line, Estate of Margaret Hayes, my grandmother's name. My stomach dropped. I clicked it open with fingers that suddenly felt heavy. My grandmother had passed away peacefully 2 weeks earlier. There would be a small service in Boston. Attached were scanned documents, including a note my grandmother had left for me. Information about a fund she'd set up years ago, an education account for my tuition and graduation expenses. According to the statement, most of the money was gone. The withdrawals were marked with dates that lined up suspiciously well with my brother's emergency expenses. Car repairs, a failed business venture, a trip he had to take with friends. My throat went dry. I scrolled further, found a note from my grandmother to the lawyer, written months before graduation. She mentioned being relieved that my mom said I didn't want a big fuss over my ceremony, preferred a small family dinner later. My vision blurred. My mother hadn't just skipped my graduation. She'd rewritten the story so completely that even my grandmother thought I didn't want anyone there. She'd used the money meant to support my education to fund my brother's life, and then acted like my graduation was just another Tuesday. How many times had she done that? How many moments had she quietly edited, replacing my needs with someone else's, while telling everyone I wasn't the type to make a big deal out of things? When Emma came home that night, she found me surrounded by printed pages. What happened? I slid the documents toward her. She told my grandmother I didn't want them at graduation. She used the money Grandma left for me for Ryan. And then she threw him a party the same day I walked across the stage, alone. Emma read in silence, jaw tightening. What do you want to do? For the first time, my answer wasn't a shaky, I don't know. I want her to feel what she made me feel. I want her to wake up one day and realize she has no idea who her daughter is anymore, because she was so busy rewriting my life to fit her story. Pause. And I want everyone she lied to see the truth. I booked a flight to Boston for the funeral. Not to reconnect, not to patch things up. I was going back to bury my grandmother, and to bury whatever remained of the daughter my mother thought she could control. The day of the funeral, the service was simple and quiet. After the burial, everyone moved to my grandmother's house for the reception. The living room was crowded with relatives. She's had such a tough year, one aunt said. Between Ryan's setbacks and Katherine going wherever she went. Pause. Linda told us Kathy didn't even want a ceremony. Can you imagine? My ears rang. I stepped into the doorway. That's not what happened. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. My mother froze, her smile slipping. Kathy, this really isn't the time. Isn't it? Grandma spent years saving for my education and my graduation. She trusted you to handle that money. She thought you were supporting me. She thought I didn't want anyone at my ceremony because you told her that. A murmur rolled through the room. I pulled printed documents from my bag, placed them on the coffee table. These are Grandma's instructions, and these are the withdrawals you made on the same dates you posted photos from Ryan's emergency trips and parties. Silence. You didn't just skip my graduation. You lied about why. You took the money meant for me, and you made sure no one would blame you by telling everyone I didn't care. My mother's face went pale. This is ridiculous. You know how dramatic Kathy can be. She left. She didn't even tell us she was going to San Francisco. Show up, I said. That's what parents do. And if you couldn't, you could have told the truth instead of turning me into the ungrateful daughter. I turned to the room. I disappeared because staying meant letting her keep rewriting my life, using my story as a prop for hers. So I erased her from everything. Papers, forms, photos, because she erased me first. For a long moment, nobody spoke. I could see it sinking in. The money, the lies, the gap between the mother my family thought they knew and the one who had quietly chosen a party over her daughter's graduation. You don't understand what it's like to hold everything together. I did what I had to do for this family. Did you? Or did you just do what made you feel important? I pulled a slim folder from my bag. These are the forms removing you as my emergency contact, as my beneficiary, as my point of contact for anything involving my life. Pause. I've already filed the paperwork in San Francisco to change my last name to Grandma's maiden name. After today, legally and emotionally, we are done. A few people gasped. Is this revenge? I asked quietly. Maybe. But it's also protection. I'm not going to keep bleeding for someone who calls my dreams just another day. My mother stared at me, expression crumpling in slow motion. I could see it in her eyes. The moment she realized I wasn't bluffing, that there would be no late-night phone call where I apologized for overreacting. I was already gone. This was just the part where I made her watch. Without another word, I gathered my folder and walked toward the door. At the threshold, I stopped, looked back one last time. Goodbye, Mom. I hope someday, when you're wondering why your daughter doesn't call, you remember that you were the one who taught me how to disappear. Then I stepped outside, closing the door behind me on the life I'd finally decided to erase. Back in San Francisco, everything looked the same, but I was different. The name change paperwork took months to process, but the act of filing it felt like flipping a switch. Katherine Hayes, my grandmother's last name. The first time I saw it printed on an official document, a strange mix of grief and pride washed over me. At the bank, I updated my records. Any family members you'd like to add as beneficiaries? No, not right now. At the doctor's office, in case of emergency, notify. I wrote Emma's name. The line that used to say, Mother, stayed blank. I went through my phone, removing my mother's number from everything. My rideshare account, my HR file, my list of trusted contacts. I changed my email, set filters to send anything from her directly to a folder labeled Archive, then muted notifications for that folder completely. Erasing her wasn't a single dramatic gesture. It was a series of small, deliberate choices, name by name, form by form, memory by memory. Weeks turned into months. Life, real, ordinary, complicated life, started to fill the spaces that anger used to occupy. Work got busier. I led my first project. I laughed more easily. Sometimes I even went a whole day without thinking about my mother at all. And then one afternoon, an email slipped past my filters. The subject line was just my name. It was from my mother. No greeting, no apologies, just a few lines. She said she'd heard about the name change. She said the family was concerned about me. She said she hoped I would come to my senses and remember where you belong. I read it twice, waiting for the old guilt to flare up, for the urge to fix everything to pull me back in. It didn't. Instead, I thought about that empty row of seats on my graduation day, about the photo of her laughing over a grill while I crossed the stage alone, about my grandmother's careful handwriting on those documents, and the trust my mother had treated like an ATM. I hit reply and typed one sentence. I remember exactly where I belong, and it isn't where I'm treated like I don't exist. Then I deleted the draft instead of sending it. Some messages don't need to be delivered to be true. I archived her email, re-enabled the filter, went back to my work. People like to say revenge is about hurting someone the way they hurt you. Maybe that's true for some. For me, it was about making sure my mother had to live with the silence she created, without the comfort of pretending it was my choice all along. I didn't send dramatic ultimatums. I didn't show up on holidays to argue. I simply stopped being available for her version of the story. I changed my name, my contacts, my future. I erased every official trace of the daughter she hadn't bothered to show up for. And in doing so, I finally saw myself clearly. Here's what the story taught me. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to celebrate you will choose someone else's ordinary day over your extraordinary moment. And they'll rewrite history to make it seem like you were the one who didn't care. This story taught me that disappearing isn't always running away. Sometimes it's the only way to stop letting people edit your life to fit their narrative. My mother didn't just skip my graduation. She lied about it, stole the money meant to support it, and made sure everyone thought I was the one who didn't want them there. That's not neglect. That's erasure. The real lesson? You don't owe your presence to people who treat your achievements like background noise. And when someone rewrites your story to make themselves look better, erasing them from your life isn't revenge. It's reclaiming authorship. So now I want to ask you, if your mother skipped your graduation for your sibling's backyard party, then lied to your grandmother about why, then stole the money meant for your education, what would you do? Would you forgive her? Go back? Try to rebuild the relationship? Or would you do what Katherine did? Disappear completely, change your name, and erase her from every official part of your life. Maybe you'd handle it differently. Confront her privately, set boundaries but keep some contact, demand repayment before cutting ties. I really want to know, because here's the deeper question. When someone doesn't just fail to show up, but actively sabotages your moment and lies about it, do they deserve a place in your future? If your parent treats your milestones like inconveniences, and your siblings' ordinary days like celebrations, are you abandoning them by leaving? Or are they the ones who abandoned you first? And here's the hardest part. If you erase someone from your life, change your emergency contacts, your name, your entire paper trail, are you being cruel? Or are you finally protecting yourself from someone who kept erasing you while pretending to love you? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because this isn't just about graduations or families or photos. It's about knowing when someone's version of you has become so distorted that the only way to find yourself is to disappear from their story completely. Let's discuss.